Hey everyone! Today I'm going to show you how to crochet Boo the Not So Scary Ghost. This is a fun and easy pattern to complete, especially for Halloween or for folks who enjoy the spookier things all year round. Boo the Ghost can be made in sport, DK, worsted, or plush yarn by adjusting your hook size. Today I'll be crocheting him with worsted weight yarn and a 4mm hook. If you haven't already, be sure to snag the matching greeting card for an adorable and one-of-a-kind gift that your friends, family, or perfect strangers will absolutely love.
We are starting on Boo the Ghost's pattern, and we're going to begin with the body and head, and we're going to be using this white colored yarn. So the first thing that we need to do is form a magic ring. So let's review how to get one of those formed, and then we'll start adding single crochet stitches inside. Alright, so let's review how to form a magic ring. So we're going to start by taking a little length of our yarn, and I'm using white for this demonstration. Make sure you're using the correct color for the pattern that you are following along with. So I'm going to take this white, and I'm going to reserve myself a little bit of a tail. So I'm going to take the end of that yarn, and I'm going to stretch it so I've got about 5 inches or so of a tail. And the tail is going to be the end that is not attached to our ball of yarn. So once we've got about 5 inches or so reserved of that tail, we're going to take our yarn hand. For me, that's my left hand, but if you're a left-handed crocheter, this might be your right hand. But we're going to take our yarn hand and make a bit of a finger guns here. So my index and my middle finger, I'm going to put them together, and I'm going to be looking at the inside of them. Then I'm going to take that tail that I've reserved, that 5 inches, and I'm going to lay it so that it's over the lower digit on my index and my middle. And then I'll take my thumb and I'm going to press the yarn to those 2 fingers. Then I'm going to take my hook hand, which is for me my right hand, but could be your left hand, and I'm going to grab the working yarn. Once I've got that grabbed, I'll take it and I'm going to wrap it around the back side of my index and my middle finger so that it's sort of close to that top digit. I'll flip my hand over so you can see. So I want it to be close to my top digit, so you can see it's closer to the 2 tops of my fingers here. So we're going to wrap that around, and then once we've got it around the top digit of those 2 fingers, we're going to bring it so that it goes behind our thumb again. So I use my thumb and I pinch that second wrap in place. Then we're going to keep wrapping, this time going around the lower digit on our 2 fingers. So I'll flip my hand over so you can see these 2 wraps here. This is that one I just made, going around that lower digit. So we'll wrap around that lower digit, and then we're going to take our working yarn and one more time snug it behind our thumb, and then just pull it out of our way. So once we've done that, we should have 2 wraps and this sort of X shape on the insides of our hands. So once we have all of the yarn wrapped around our yarn hand here, we're ready to take our crochet hook in our hook hand, and we're going to flip our yarn hand over so that we're looking at the back side of our fingers. So we should have 2 wraps, one around the top digit, one around the lower digit on our yarn hand. We're going to take our hook and slip it underneath that top wrap, and then use the hook part to snag that lower wrap and bring it underneath the top wrap. Then we're going to take both of our hands and we're going to flip them over so that we're looking at the inside and away from our body. So I'm flipping out and away from my body. And then I'm going to bring my 2 hands together, so my yarn hand and my hook hand. I'm going to bring them so the index finger here on my hook hand can touch the back side of my yarn hand. Then using the thumb and index finger of my hook hand, I'm going to grab both the wrap on my hook and the wrap still on my fingers right where they meet. So I'm going to kind of snag the 2 of them together right there. Once I've got those pinched between my thumb and index finger on my hook hand, I can let go with my thumb and then gently slide those wraps off of my index and middle finger. So now that I've done that, let's locate both the tail, that's the end that's no longer attached to our ball of yarn, so it's got this blunt cut end on it, we're going to kind of pull that over into the 12 o'clock position. So kind of up and away. And then let's locate the working yarn. That's the stuff still attached to our ball of yarn. So once we've got those two identified, we're going to take the working yarn and begin tensioning it. So to do that, we'll take our index finger on our yarn hand. That for me is my left hand. Could be your right hand for you if you're a left-handed crocheter. And we're going to slip the working yarn over the top of our index finger. Then we'll take our middle, ring, and pinky finger on our yarn hand, and we're going to wrap those around that working yarn. Once you've done that, we also need to sandwich this working yarn in between our magic ring and our tail. So to do that, I like to take my middle finger and thumb on my yarn hand, and I'm going to grab that tail with my middle finger here. And then with my thumb, I want to grab the ring. So we don't want to grab our working yarn, which is kind of going in through that ring. We want to just get the bottom end of the ring here. And once you've got those two, we're going to kind of pinch them together. And you can see that sandwiches our working yarn in between the two of them. Once we've got those grabbed with our yarn hand, we can let go with our index and thumb on our hook hand. And the ring here that's on our hook is really loose. We'll tighten that by pulling our index finger up and away. You can see how that tightens that yarn. And then once we've done that, we're ready to yarn over and draw through the loop on our hook. So we'll take our hook, put the yarn over our hook. So I kind of just swing around the back side there and grab it. And we're going to pull that working yarn directly through the loop on our hook. Once we've done that, you can let go. It's not going to come undone. It won't come untied, which is very comforting because we've spent all this time creating it. The last thing we need to do before we're ready to begin is we're going to take the tail, and you can see it's threaded through our magic ring. We're going to take that tail and we're going to pull it out from the center of that ring. And from here, we're ready to begin working in the magic ring. We also need to work over the tail as well. So we'll take that ring and we'll take the tail and we're going to set them together so that we are working over both of these strands, the ring and the tail. All right, you are ready to go ahead and continue on in your pattern. All right, so now that I have my magic ring formed, we're ready to begin in on round 1. And if you look at the top left-hand corner of the video, you'll see the written instructions for round 1. Those are going to track with us as we work, so feel free to reference either the top left-hand corner or, of course, the written pattern for Boo the Ghost. So for round 1, we're going to place 6 SC in MR. So let me translate that. That means we're going to be putting 6 single crochet stitches inside of our magic ring. So remember, we're going to be working in both the ring and over the tail left behind from when we tied the ring. So you want to hold those two together. And we're going to start by placing our first single crochet stitch inside that ring and around that tail. So to do that, we'll take our hook and we're going to go through the ring and underneath the tail. And then we're going to yarn under, meaning we're going to put the yarn underneath our hook and use the hook to grab that yarn and pull it through the ring and under that tail and then up into a nice tall loop on our crochet hook. Then to finish our single crochet stitch, we're going to yarn over, meaning we're going to put the yarn over our hook and then draw that yarn through the only 2 loops left on our hook. And that's our first single crochet stitch. We also want to mark that stitch with our stitch marker, and we're going to mark the first stitch from each round to help us keep track of where we are in our pattern. So we'll take our stitch marker and we're going to slip it under both sides of that stitch. So I'm pushing from front to back here through both of the little legs of that V of our stitch. Then I'm going to lock my stitch marker to keep it in place. So we need to add 5 more single crochet stitches inside of our magic ring to complete round 1. And if you look, the parentheses at the end are going to tell us how many stitches we need at the end of the row. So we need 5 more single crochet stitches. We're going to make them the same way. We'll take our hook, go through the magic ring and underneath the tail, yarn under and draw through and up until we have a nice tall loop on our hook. Then yarn over and draw through the 2 loops left on our hook. So there's our second single crochet. We'll go through again, yarn under and draw through, then yarn over, draw through both loops. There's our third single crochet. Alright, so I have all 6 of my single crochet stitches made, and you can double check how many you have by counting the V's of the tops of the stitch. So I like to turn my work kind of on the side, and we're going to count. Here's our first that's marked, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And we don't count the loop on our hook. That's sort of like a stitch in progress. So when you have all 6 of those single crochet stitches added to your magic ring, we're going to do the magic part and take the tail that we've been crocheting over and pull tightly to close off that first round. Okay, so that sets us up for round 2. And round 2, we need to make 6 INC, and we should have 12 stitches at the end of the round. So an INC stands for increase, which is where we're going to place 2 single crochet stitches in each one of the 6 stitches we made for round 1. So we'll start off by taking our stitch marker out of that first stitch, and then keep your eyes on where it is currently, because we're going to be putting our hook through the same place it's in. So we'll slip that stitch marker out, and then we're going to make a single crochet stitch through that first stitch where the marker just was. So we'll take our hook and we're going to push it through from front to back underneath both legs of that V on the top of the stitch. And once we've done that, it's just like how we made our single crochet stitches inside of our magic ring. We'll yarn under and draw that yarn through the stitch we pushed our hook through and then up into a nice tall loop. And then yarn over and pull through the only 2 loops left on our hook. We also need to mark that stitch since it's the first one of our round. So we'll take our marker and slip it through both sides of the stitch and lock. And then to finish our increase, we need to put a second single crochet stitch in that same stitch from round 1. So if you look, you can see my stitches coming out of that hole. We're going to go through that same place and make a second single crochet stitch. So now you can see I have 2 little V's coming out of the same hole or stitch from the previous round. Then we're going to kind of rotate our work a little bit, get to where we can see the next V of our next stitch, and go through just like we did with the first one. Yarn under and draw up a loop. Then yarn over and draw through both. And then repeat by putting another single crochet stitch in that same place. And we're going to keep adding increases, so 2 single crochet stitches, to each of the remaining 4 stitches of the round. And that will give us 12 stitches total at the end of round 2. Alright, so that is round 2 complete. I'm going to take this time before I move on to round 3 to tighten my magic ringtail one final time, so pull it pretty tightly. And then I'm going to take my scissors and I'm going to give it a trim. So I'm not going to cut the tail all the way off. I'm just going to make it so it's shorter and it doesn't get in my way as I continue working around. So I'm going to leave just a little bit of space on the back here and trim. And then you can discard any of the magic ring tail that you didn't end up needing. And that's going to keep it out of our way as we continue working around. Alright, so we're ready for round 3. And round 3, we've got some new instructions to kind of break apart here. So if you look at the top left, you'll see in parentheses, we have the pattern 1 SC, 1 INC. And then right outside, there's a multiplication sign, and then the number 6. So what that means is we're going to repeat everything inside of those parentheses, 1 SC, 1 INC, 6 times total in the order it appears, and that will give us 18 stitches at the end of our round. So let's start by taking out our stitch marker. And we'll begin by putting 1 SC, 1 single crochet stitch right where that marker just was, and then mark that, of course. And then the next part of our instructions say we need to put 1 INC, 1 increase, in the next stitch. So remember, that's 2 single crochet stitches in the same place, in the same stitch from the previous round. Alright, so that's 1 single crochet, 1 increase, 1 time. So we need to repeat that pattern 5 more times for a total of 6 repetitions, and that will give us 18 stitches at the end of our round. So I'll put 1 single crochet stitch in the next stitch, then an increase in the stitch right after, and that's my second repetition, 1 single crochet, 1 increase. There's my third repetition, Alright, and there was my last increase, which wraps up round 3, and we're ready for round 4. So round 4 looks a lot like round 3. We've got some parentheses, but this time we'll need to make 2 single crochet, meaning 1 single crochet in the next stitch, 1 single crochet in the stitch after, and then an increase. So we'll take our marker out. Here's my first single crochet stitch, and of course mark that stitch. Then I need to make a second single crochet stitch, so 1 in the next stitch. So there's my 2 single crochet stitches, and then an increase in the third stitch of the round. And there's one repetition of 2 single crochet increase. Just like round 3, we need to repeat that 5 more times for a total of 6 repetitions, which will give us 24 stitches at the end of this round. So again, that's 1 single crochet, 1 single crochet, increase, all the way around. Alright, so I just wrapped up round 4, and I'm ready to move on to round 5, which looks a lot like round 4 and round 3. We're going to put 1 single crochet stitch in the next 3 stitches of the round. So that's 1 single crochet stitch, and then remark. My second single crochet stitch, and my third single crochet stitch, and then an increase, and there is 1 repetition of that parentheses pattern. Just like the last 2 rows, we're going to repeat that 5 more times for a total of 6 repetitions, and that should give us 30 stitches at the end of round 5. So that's round 5 done for me. I'm ready to move on to round 6, which again looks a lot like the last 3 rounds that we've made, but this time we need to put 4 single crochet stitches before we increase. So go ahead and slip that stitch marker out. Here's my first single crochet stitch. Here's my second, third, and fourth, and then I'll increase in the next stitch. At this point you probably know the drill. We're going to repeat that repetition pattern another 5 times for a total of 6 repetitions, or a total of 36 stitches at the end of round 6. Okay, so I just finished the last stitch of round 6. So for rounds 7 through 9, all we need to do is put 1 single crochet stitch in every stitch all the way around. So I'm going to take my stitch marker out, put my first single crochet stitch, and then put my marker back in place. And we're going to want to do that for every round. So round 8 and round 9, you do the same thing. Reinsert your stitch marker. But we're going to just put one single crochet stitch in every stitch all the way around. So that's 36 single crochet stitches for rounds 7, 8, and 9. So I will see you back here whenever I have put my last single crochet stitch in round 9, and I'm ready to move on to round 10. Alright, so I have just wrapped up the last single crochet stitch of round 9, and before I move on to round 10, I wanted to point out that there's a chance your work has been working inside out. So if you look at my work, you'll see my stitches make these tidy X shapes, and the top magic ring is just a closed ring. If your work looks sort of like this, first and very obviously your magic ring is kind of chilling on the outside like a little hair, and then your stitches have these lines that run through them as opposed to sort of that X shape. This is the inside of your work, and it needs to be pushed and folded so that it's on the inside of this sort of cup shape that we're making with the top of the ghost. So if that's happened, it's an easy fix. You just need to kind of flip the work inside out, and it's a good time right now to do that so you can encourage that shape to continue as we start in on round 10. So round 10, we're going to go ahead and take our stitch marker out, and just like round 6, 5, 4, and 3, we've got some parentheses to repeat. And this time we're going to put 5 single crochet stitches before we increase. So here's my first remark. So there are my first 5 single crochet stitches, and then I will increase in the next stitch. And just like round 6, 5, 4, and 3, we're going to repeat that repetition pattern 5 more times for a total of 6 repetitions, which should give us 42 stitches at the end of round 10. So that was the last increase on round 10. So for rounds 11 through 16, just like we did with round 7 through 9, we're going to just put 1 single crochet stitch in every stitch all the way around. So don't forget, we're going to want to mark the beginning of each round. So move your stitch marker up as you start in on the next round. And I will see you back here whenever I have put my last single crochet stitch of round 16. Okay, so I have just finished the last single crochet stitch in round 16. Before I move on to round 17, it's time to add the safety eyes. So I'm going to take my hook and I'm going to pull the last loop on it really tall, and then take my hook out so that I can add the safety eyes without worrying about anything coming undone. So I'm going to take my ghost and I'm going to flip him over so that this loop is at the back and towards the bottom. And then I'm going to add the safety eyes in between rounds 11 and 12. And we'll leave about 5 stitches apart whenever we place them. So before I grab my safety eyes and start counting, this is also a good time to point out that if you're giving Boo the Ghost to a pet or to a small child, you may want to use some black embroidery thread and embroider the eyes on instead. We'll go ahead and grab those. So I'm going to be using these safety eyes with the painted shines on them. You can use whatever kind you'd like for your project. So I'm going to take just one of those safety eyes, and I'm going to use the stem to count down from round 1 to round 11 because we need to find rounds 11 and 12 for the eyes. So double checking I've got my stitch marker at the back, and I'm going to start at the magic ring and count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So it's the space between round 11 and round 12. So we're going to take the stem of our eye and push it straight through the fabric and in between the 11th and the 12th round. Then we need to leave 5 stitches between our first and our second eye. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my second eye, and let's count 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then we'll push the eye in between rounds 11 and 12, but 5 stitches apart from the first eye. So of course, since this is your project, feel free to kind of experiment with the eye placement. If you'd like it to be a little higher, a little lower, further apart, close together, it's up to you. I will say the mouth is going to be embroidered in between the eyes, so it might be a good idea to leave a little space or keep that in mind as you're placing the eyes. Once you've got them where you'd like them though, we're going to take the little backs that come with the eye. Inside of Boo's body here, we'll slip the little plastic back onto the stem and then push, which clicks it in place. And we're going to repeat that on the other eye. Alright, so there are the safety eyes placed, and we are ready to move on in our pattern. So we're going to flip our piece back over, and then insert our hook inside of that loop that we pulled up long, and then pull our working yarn to sort of tighten it down. Alright, so we are ready for round 17, and we're going to be working in the BLO, or the back loop only, for all of the stitches in round 17. So I'm going to take my stitch marker out, and I'm going to point out where the back loops are. So as we've been working, we've been going through both sides of our stitch. If you look at that stitch here on my hook, you can see there's 2 loops, that little V shape. The back loop is referring to this one closest to the back side or inside of our work. So that top loop there, the one closest to the inside. So when we're working in the back loops only, rather than slipping our hook through underneath both of the legs of the V, we're going to take our hook and just snag that back loop. And it leaves the front loop behind as we work. So let's go ahead and start with what we know here in round 17, which is to put 5 single crochet stitches in the back loop. So we're going to slip in between those 2 legs of the V, grab just the back loop, and then make our single crochet stitch as we would normally by yarning under, drawing through the back loop, then yarning over and drawing through both loops. We'll also mark that stitch as we have been all of the first stitches of our rounds. So we'll do our next single crochet stitch, so go through that back loop, yarn under, draw through the back loop, then yarn over and draw through both. So there's our second back loop only. We'll keep adding those until we have 5 total. There are my 5 back loop only single crochet stitches, and you can see it leaves the front loop behind, which is good because we're going to be coming back for that. But next we need to learn how to do a DEC, or a decrease. So when we increase, we add 2 single crochet stitches in the same place. A decrease, we're going to take 2 stitches and single crochet them together, making it so that 2 stitches become 1 stitch in this round. We're also still working in the back loop only, So just like with these single crochet stitches, we're only going to be grabbing those back loops. So let's start by taking our hook and going through the next back loop. Then we'll yarn under and draw our yarn through that back loop. And then we're going to repeat that same process in the next back loop. So take your hook, go through that next back loop, yarn under and draw through that back loop. And we should have 3 loops on our hook. Then to finish off this decrease, we'll yarn over and draw through all 3 of the loops left on our hook. So there is our decrease in the back loops only, just like we were doing in rounds 3 through 6, where we were going 1 single crochet increase. For rounds 18 through 21, we're going to be doing 5 single crochet decrease, 4 single crochet decrease. So we're going to continue going through on round 17, putting 1 single crochet stitch in the next 5 back loops, and then decreasing another 5 times for a total of 36 stitches at the end of the round. So 1 single crochet in the back loop, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then our back loop only decrease. So go through the next back loop, yarn under and draw up a loop. Go through the next back loop, yarn under and draw up a loop, and yarn over and draw through all 3. We're just going to keep repeating that pattern all the way around. Alright, so that was my last decrease for round 17. I'm ready for round 18, and we're back working in both sides of our stitch. So I'll take my stitch marker out. We're going to put 1 single crochet stitch in the next 4 stitches of our round. And then follow that with a decrease, but this time not working in the back loops only. So we're going to go through both sides of our next stitch, yarn under and draw up a loop, and go through the next stitch, both sides again, yarn under and draw up a loop, then yarn over and draw through all 3 loops on our hook. Then we're going to repeat that pattern of 4 single crochet decrease 5 more times for a total of 6 repetitions, or 30 stitches, at the end of round 18. Alright, that was the end of round 18 for me. I'm ready for round 19, where I'm going to put 1 single crochet stitch in the next 3 stitches of the round. Follow that with a decrease. Then repeat that pattern of 3 single crochet decrease 5 more times for a total of 6 or 24 stitches at the end of round 19. Alright, that was the end of round 19 for me. Round 20, we'll start by putting 1 single crochet stitch in the next 2 stitches of the round. And then follow that with a decrease. And then, just like the last few rounds, we'll repeat that pattern 5 more times for a total of 6 repetitions. Alright, that's the end of round 20 for me. I'm ready for round 21, where I'll put 1 single crochet stitch in the next stitch of the round. And then follow that with a decrease. And repeat that pattern all the way around until I have 12 stitches. Alright, so before we make our last round, which is round 22, we need to stuff the inside of the body. So I'm going to take my hook, and just like I did with the eyes, I'm going to pull that last loop up kind of long, and then take my hook out. And then I'm going to take some of my stuffing and I'm going to add it to the inside of the body in the opening here at the very bottom. So when I add the stuffing, I need to be really careful not to accidentally stuff this loop or my working yarn inside. So I like to kind of hold those off to the side as I add stuffing. And we don't want to stuff Boo the Ghost so full that this bottom part underneath those front loops that we left behind like stands out too terribly much. So don't overstuff. Add just enough to kind of get this rounded top shape, and then it sort of flattens off here at the bottom. Alright, so the body is stuffed. I'm ready to reinsert my hook into that loop we drew up long, and then pull my working yarn to tighten it back down. And I'm ready for round 22, which is the last round of the body. So I'll take my stitch marker out, and we're going to just decrease in each stitch all the way around. So we'll end with 6 total decreases at the end of round 22. Alright, that was my last decrease, so I'm ready to fasten off, and to do that, I'm going to take my stitch marker out, and I'm going to make a slip stitch in the stitch it was just in. So to do that, I'll take my hook, I'm going to go through both sides of that stitch, the first decrease I made, yarn under, and draw up a loop, and then I'm going to draw the loop I just created through the only other loop on my hook. And that's how you slip stitch. Then we can cut our working yarn, and we don't need very much, just a little bit to sew with. Then we can take the loop left on our hook from that slip stitch that we made and pull until the tail we cut goes all the way through it. And then we can tighten that tail and that loop down into a knot. So next we need to close off the bottom of the body. So we'll take the tail that we just cut and we will thread it through the eye of a yarn needle. And then to sew the body closed, we're going to sew through each of the front loops from those 6 decreases we made at the end of round 22. So just like we did in round 17 where we worked in the back loop only, this time we're going to grab just the front loop. So the back loop, again, is the one closest to the inside of our work. The front loop is the one closest to the outside or front of our work. So we'll take our yarn needle and we're going to slip it up through only getting that front loop, and then sew all the way through that front loop. Then rotate and do the same thing on our next front loop. And we're just going to keep rotating until we've sewn all 6 of those stitches. Then, when you've sewn through all 6, grab that tail that we've been sewing with and pull gently to close off that last round. Then we need to tie a knot and weave this tail into the body. So we'll do that by taking the tail and we're going to loop it over the surface of our work. Then we'll take our needle and we're going to sew into some of the fabric of our body. So grab a couple of stitches, you don't need very many, just one. And sew up through where that loop is. And then we're going to pull our yarn and it's going to take the loop we made and wrap it around the tail and pull tightly to tie a knot. Then to weave this tail in, we're going to take our needle and we're going to send it into the fabric of the body and then up and out through just any place. And when you pull tightly, it sends the knot to the inside and weaves the tail in. I like to sew a couple extra times, just going in and then back out through the body to sort of weave this tail in really well. And once I've done that, I can unthread that needle. And then by using my scissors and pulling that tail tightly, I'll snip close to the fabric of the body, which weaves the tail in, and I can discard anything that didn't get woven in. Alright, so that's the body done. Next we need to attach onto these front loops here to make sort of the skirt bottom part of the body. So to do that, we're going to flip Boo over and then kind of look along the bottom here until we find where those loops have a little bit of a jog. So you can see this one is a little higher up than this one. We're going to want to attach on to this one here, and we'll take our hook and we're just going to slide it underneath that loop. So now that I've got my hook slid underneath that loop here, I'm going to take that white yarn, and I like to make a little loop out of it. So I reserve a little bit of a tail. You can see I've got it here in my hand. I'm going to pinch those two together to form a little loop. And then I'm going to put that on my hook and then pull that loop through to attach it to the body of the ghost. So what we're going to do next is grab our working yarn and lay it over our finger to tension. And then there's a little bit of a tail left over from when we fastened on. I'm going to lay that along the back sides of those loops. And we're going to work under both the front loops left behind and that tail, just like we did with the magic ring, to sort of work it in as we go. So I sort of hold it down against the body. And then we'll need to take our hook and yarn over and draw it through the loop on our hook. So that gets us attached, and we're ready to start this repetition pattern for the skirt. So in our next front loop, we'll go through and then also grab that tail. We're going to make a single crochet. So just like we have been, we'll yarn under, draw it through both the front loop and then around that tail, then yarn over and draw through both loops. Then in the next two front loops, we need to make a HDC, or a half double crochet stitch. So to form a half double crochet, we're going to take our hook and we're going to wrap our yarn around it. I usually take my hook and I go kind of clockwise and just grab my working yarn. Once I've done that, I'm going to slip underneath the front loop left behind on my work, so the very next one. And also I'm going to lay that tail over. Then I'll yarn under and draw through the front loop. Should have 3 loops here on my hook. Then I'll yarn over and draw through all 3 loops on my hook. So that's a half double crochet stitch. At this point, we've woven our tail in pretty well, so we can give it one final tug to tighten it. And then you don't have to worry about weaving it anymore. You can kind of just let it hang on the outside of the body. Alright, so we need to make another half double crochet stitch. So we're going to take our hook and wrap our yarn around it, go through our next front loop, then yarn under, draw through, then yarn over and draw through all 3 loops left on our hook. Next we need to make 1 DC, or double crochet, and we're going to start that the same way we did our half double crochet. We'll take our hook and wrap our yarn around it, go through our next front loop, then yarn under and draw through that front loop. Then we're going to yarn over and draw through 2 of the loops left on our hook, and then do that a second time. So yarn over and draw through 2, the only other 2 loops left on our hook. And there's a double crochet stitch. Then we need to make 2 more half double crochet stitches, one in the next 2 front loops left behind. So wrap our yarn around, go through that next front loop, yarn under and draw through the loop, then yarn over and draw through all 3 loops left on our hook. There's 1 half double crochet. Repeat in the next front loop. There's my second half double crochet. And then we're going to repeat that pattern of 1 single crochet, 2 half double crochet, 2 half double crochet. We need to do that another 6 times for a total of 7 repetitions of that pattern. So 1 single crochet, 2 half double crochet, 1 double crochet, 2 half double crochet, There's my second repetition. I'm going to just keep repeating that until I am all the way around the bottom of Boo the Ghost's body. Alright, so I've placed my last half double crochet and I'm ready to fasten off. So to do that, I'm going to go to that first loop here where I attached on. I'm going to go through that loop and I'm going to slip stitch. So yarn under and draw through that front loop. And then draw that loop I just created through the only other loop left on my hook. Then I'm ready to cut my working yarn. I don't need very much, just a little bit to weave in. Then I'm going to take that last loop I just created and pull until my tail goes all the way through. And then tighten that down into a knot. And then I can trim the tail that I worked in from fastening on. And then weave this tail I just made from fastening off in. So we'll thread that through the eye of our tapestry needle. And then we're going to sew it just into the body. So I like to sew really close to where the slip knot is. I like to sew really close to where the slip stitch is, so I'm just going to go right through the body here. And then pull. Then I'm going to sew it through a couple more times, just like I did on the bottom of the body's tail, just to make sure it's really woven in. Once I've done that, I can unthread my tapestry needle and then pull and trim. And that is the bottom of the ghost's body added. So next, let's go ahead and add the mouth and the rosy cheeks. So we'll start by making the mouth. We're going to be using some black embroidery thread. And I'm going to thread this through the eye of my embroidery needle. And then we're going to send our embroidery needle in the space between two stitches. Doesn't really matter where, just somewhere kind of close to where we're going to be sewing. So in between the spaces between stitches. And then in that same space where we put the eyes, in between rounds 11 and 12, I'm going to sew up by the left eye. And then when I pull, I need to make sure not to pull all of my embroidery floss through, because we're going to come back and tie these two ends together. So I'm going to sew a long stitch between the two eyes. So I'm going to sew back down by the right eye, and then I need to come up in between the space where my tail is coming out of. So sew up through that same space you came down through. And that line will form Boo's mouth. Then we can unthread our tapestry, our embroidery needle, and we're going to take these two tails and we're going to tie them together. Just like you would your shoelace, sort of a square knot here. And I'm going to double knot mine just for extra security. Then we're going to trim those two tails short. And you can discard anything you didn't use. And then to hide these two tails, I take my embroidery needle and I'm going to slip it underneath some of the work next to where those tails are, and then just pull the work up. And that will make the knot hide inside of the body. You can also take your tapestry needle and sort of poke to get it to sit a little flatter inside. But that hides the knot inside and is the mouth. So next, let's go ahead and add the rosy cheeks. And the rosy cheeks are one row below where the eyes are, and then outset on the outsides of both of the eyes. So we'll take some pink yarn or pink embroidery floss. I'm using some pink yarn here. I'm going to go ahead and thread my needle with this pink. And just like we did with the black, we're going to sew in the space between stitches. So I'm going to send my needle in the space between these two here. And all the way across until you're at rounds 12 and 13. And remember to leave some on the outside of your work because we're going to come back and tie to it. And we'll sew a straight stitch just to the outside of the eye on this side, and then repeat on this side as well. So there's that cheek. I'll sew again on this side. And I'm going to come up through the same stitch I went down through, just like I did on the mouth. So now that I have that stitch sewn, I'm going to unthread my embroidery needle. Just like I did with the mouth, I'm going to tie these two tails together. And I'll double knot for some extra security. And just like with the mouth, trim short, discard what you didn't use. Then we're going to pull the fabric of the body up to send the knot to the inside. And then using our needle we can kind of poke to hide the tails to the inside. Alright, so there is the face added. Let's move on to the next part of our pattern. Alright, so next up we need to make the arms, and we need to make two of these. And we're starting with that same white color we used on the body, and we need to start by tying a slip knot and chaining. So let's review how to get a slip knot formed and how to make a chain stitch. Alright, so let's review how to tie a slip knot and how to form a chain stitch. So we're going to take our yarn, and I'm using white for this demonstration, so just double check you're using the correct color from your pattern. And we're going to reserve ourselves a little bit of a tail, just like we do with our magic ring. So I'm going to take maybe 5 or 6 inches or so of my working yarn here, make myself a little tail. And then we're going to take that tail and we're going to wrap it behind our working yarn. So we're sort of making like a lowercase letter B. So once we've got that wrapped around, we formed this loop here. We're going to kind of sandwich the working yarn with the tail. So bring it back around and kind of cross it over that loop. Sort of like a pretzel twist. Then when we've done that, what we need to do is draw this twist that we've just done, that strand, through this loop without pulling the tail all the way through, because that would just tie a knot. So I take my hook hand, which is my right hand, and I grab what I've laid over that loop and pull it. And then with my other hand, I grab my working yarn and then pull the loop through. And the reason I form my slip knots this way is because they tighten when you pull on the tail, but not when you pull on the working yarn. It won't tighten while you're trying to add stitches to it. So once you've got that slip knot formed, you're going to take your hook and slip it inside of the slip knot, and then pull the tail to tighten it into a loop down onto your hook. Then you're ready to begin tensioning by laying the working yarn over your yarn index finger. So for me, that's my left index finger. And then wrapping the rest of your fingers around our working yarn. And then I like to hold on to the slip knot itself with my middle and thumb on my yarn hand. And then we're ready to form a chain. So to chain, we'll take our hook and we're going to yarn over, meaning we're going to put the yarn over our hook. and then draw the working yarn through the slip knot we tied, and then pull up to form a nice tall loop. So that's our first chain. To continue chaining, we're going to just keep yarning over and drawing a nice tall loop through each time. One final thing though, the loop on your hook, as I'm sure I may have mentioned in the video before, that doesn't count as a stitch. This is sort of like a stitch in progress. So right now I have 2 chain stitches formed. I'll yarn over and draw another stitch through. That'll be 3, 4. And as you add chain stitches, I tend to move my middle and my thumb up closer to my hook to help me sort of tension my yarn a little easier. So as I chain, I just keep shifting my hand down the stitches that I've just created. Alright, so that's how you tie a slip knot and chain. Alright, so I have my slip knot formed, and we need to begin by chaining 7 stitches for the arm. So again, we're going to yarn over, draw our working yarn through to form our first chain, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Then, now that we have our 7 chain stitches formed, we're going to be working in the second chain from our hook. So remember, we don't count the loop on our hook. So in the second chain, so 1, 2, we'll push through, and we're going to yarn under and draw up a loop, and then just draw that loop through to make a slip stitch. And we'll keep slip stitching, adding 1 to each of the 6 chain stitches. So here's my second. And my third. Here's my fourth. Fifth. And my last slip stitch is going to be in that slip knot we tied. And that forms the arm, so we're ready to fasten off. We'll cut a tail, and then I'm going to pull both the tail from the slip knot and the tail that we just cut through that last loop on my hook. So I'm going to grab them both and just pull through, and then just keep pulling until they both go through that last slip stitch. Then I'll tighten them both down, the slip knot tail and the tail I just cut. And that is one of the arms done. So let's make a second and then get them attached to the body. Alright, so I have both of the arms made, and I'm ready to go ahead and get them attached. So I'll start with one, and we have 2 tails that we need to weave in and work with. So I'm going to weave the shorter of the 2. For me, that's my slip knot tail. I'm going to take it and thread it through the eye of my tapestry needle. And then I'm going to weave this tail in first. It'll help anchor the arm onto Boo's body, and then also takes care of weaving it in later. So we're going to be adding the stitches of, so we're going to be working in rounds 12 and 15 for these, which also happens to be the round that our cheeks are embroidered on. So I'm going to take my slip knot tail, and I'm just going to go 1 stitch back from where that cheek is and weave it straight through the body. Then I can unthread. And you can see that will hold the arm on and makes it a little easier for us to sew it. And I'm going to repeat that on the other side with the other arm. So get the slip knot tail, thread it through the eye of my tapestry needle, And so it's straight through, just to weave it in. And then we're ready to go ahead and sew the arms down. So I'm going to thread the longer tail from when I fastened off the arms. And we're going to sew down into the fabric of the body where the slipknot tail went through. And we want to attach the arms so they sit along the front of the body like this. So I'm going to sew up through the body and up through the arm, down at the bottom where it's attached. And by pulling tight, it sort of tacks the arm to the body. Also back down through the arm at the bottom where it's attached. Come back up through the top here. And also the top of the arm down one last time. And that attaches the arm to the side of the body. And then I'm going to tie another surface knot. And weave that tail in. And then I'm going to repeat on the other arm on the other side. So thread that long tail from when we fasten the arm off through my tapestry needle. Sew down at the top of the arm and grab the bottom of the arm. Pull pretty tight. And sew down through the bottom of the arm to tack it to the body. And then sew through the top of the arm one last time. And then we'll tie another surface knot to secure the arm. Then weave that tail in. And we can trim all of the tails left behind. And that wraps up Boo the Ghost's tutorial.